No intro, straight onto the guide. Reaper's weapon, the Lil Nas X's sidearm, makes Reaper dual-wield shotguns dealing 120 damage per shot, with fall-off starting at 10 meters, paired with a fire rate of 2 shots per second. The biggest concept with Reaper's shotguns is target priority. Many pseudo-educational content creators, such as your Overwatch, will claim that Reaper is quote-unquote much weaker against tanks due to the range and damage change. Whilst elements of his argument are true, specifically to do with Reaper's playstyle change, Reaper's damage already got halved by tanks with armor prior to the patch, and as Nata explains here, Fredo misses out a key factor in the Reaper change, which is his uptime.
Because the distance got changed, Reaper can now shoot more effectively at a bit more range. You can do more to squishies as well, but the biggest concept is the fact that because you're further away, you don't take melee damage, and you can like play corners more, you can play more with your tanks a bit behind, so you take less poke and melee damage, which means, guess what, your Wraith is forced less. And because your Wraith is forced less, you can stay in fights longer, hence you can do more damage.
As a general rule of thumb, you should be prioritizing targets that you can kill. The possibility of getting a 2-tap on a backline support can often be more valuable than shooting a Reinhardt, but this can be dependent upon composition, as I explain in the latter sections of my guide. Moving on to Reaper's range and when you should start shooting squishy targets. At a roughly 5 to 6 meters away, you can 2-shot most squishy heroes. At 7 or 8 meters away, you can just about 3-tap most squishy heroes. Beyond 8 meters is where Reaper's range starts becoming inconsistent, but you can still deal meaningful damage to the extent that it can draw resources and attention away from the front line. As a summary, if your sightlines are beyond 8 to 10 meters, start shooting tanks, and the reverse applies with most squishy heroes. The penultimate piece of advice is trigger discipline. I like to hog and tracer, taking the extra half a second or so to realign your crosshairs will help you land more meaningful damage. Not to mention, landing the first shot is critical, especially if you're unscouted, as it's essentially a free shot you're missing if you don't take your time. The last thing to mention is the corner abuse as Reaper, especially when holding short sightlines. Too many Reapers tunnel on the target they are shooting, leading to their Wraith being forced, hence holding short sightlines, especially when accounting for the Reaper range buff, is key. Reaper's first ability, the Devil's Advocate V2, makes Reaper become an invincible shadow for 3 seconds, moving 50% faster, paired with an 8-second cooldown. All status effects are cleansed, and your guns are reloaded. The main concept with Wraith is to use it defensively for when you need to escape. A general rhythm of Reaper's gameplay is that you flank behind to their backline, apply pressure, use Wraith to escape, and rinse and repeat. You really don't want to use your Wraith loosely for greedy purposes, since that should call for you to play passive when you don't have Wraith up, as Temporal explains here.
I can live with your Wraith being forced, but you better not finish your Wraith where you started, which is exactly what you did. You felt the need to Wraith, your positioning was such that you're taking damage. You can't just go, I'm Wraithing for invulnerability and to get healed a little bit. You've got to go, okay, I'm going to end up over here where I've got a little bit or better cover, a little bit more work to do. Or you could potentially go, hey, I'm going to try to end up here and just delete this and then enforce this. Like, these are all options. I don't want you just Wraithing and ending up right where you started. Like, your Wraith is a changing of your aggression level. And if your Wraith is getting forced and you feel the need of, no, I'm in a plenty safe spot, well, you weren't in an aggressive enough spot to start then when you had Wraith.
The penultimate thing to mention is to know when to cancel your Wraith. You may want to cancel it slightly earlier in a duel to dodge stuns or to catch the enemy off guard. However, the caveat is again to not greed your Wraith just to win a duel, as it makes you much more vulnerable and passive afterwards. You might also want to think about where you finish your Wraith instead of always Wraithing back to your team. For instance, on King Zero First Defense, you might duel Squishy by statue and then use Wraith to escape back to Mega and set up another off-angle engage, similar to Doomfist punching out. Not to mention the room is enclosed with short sightlines, which should in theory aid you in most duels. This is beneficial for 2 main reasons. It avoids the sound and visual cue of your teleports and increases your uptime. However, against mobile heroes such as Tracer with multiple blinks and a small hitbox, or against D.Va with armor, matrix and missiles, they may end up chasing you down and winning the duel, hence I only recommend doing this against immobile compositions on maps with short sightlines. Reaper's second ability, the Spooky Boy, makes Reapers disappear and reappear at a location of up to 35 meters in distance with a cast time of 1.5 seconds and a cooldown of 10 seconds. It can also be used in the air, reducing Reaper's fall speed. Since Reaper's teleport is very synonymous with flanking, which is a macro playstyle for the end section of the video, I'll introduce the more basic concepts here. The main key aspect to Reaper's teleport is timing, as if you mistime your teleport, the enemy team can force your angle out for free, effectively making the team fight a 5v6, as Temporal gives an example of here.
You teleported in when you were down 2, of course they saw you teleport in and they had resources to come chase you out because they were up to. Then you're using your Wraith to get out. Your Wraith doesn't actually get you far enough out because of the depth that you're in, and then you're missing both of your cooldowns when they actually make their play. You staggered yourself, you dragged your team into basically a team wipe when your team was going to get out cleanly. This is not okay.
You also don't have to get a kill when you teleport, as Spilo explains here.
And there's a misconception with Reaper that if I TP, I need to get a kill. If you TP, you don't need to get a kill. You need to bait attention, force cooldowns, and then get back to your team safely. You do that cycle over and over and over again. You decide, okay, now is a good time to TP. Okay, now I go a TP, I put pressure backline, I get out, and I do it over and over and over again.
Additionally, a very obvious tip is to not teleport in front of the enemy team. Even though you are invulnerable while exiting, you will have to pop Wraith immediately, making you very telegraphed and vulnerable as soon as you exit Wraith. Reaper's ultimate, the B-Tech Beyblade, makes Reaper empty both of his shotguns at breakneck speed, dealing 170 DPS in an 8 meter radius lasting for 3 seconds. Shotguns are also automatically reloaded. The first bit of important tech is the shotgun animation cancel before you blossom in order to gain an extra bit of burst damage. With usage, the key aspect of blossom which will determine how much value you receive from it is your timing, as Spilo explains here.
The timing of your ultimate is so incredibly crucial. I don't like opening with Reaper ult, I like waiting until things get a little messy. Reaper ult is so easy to counter with cooldowns, but is so hard to counter without them. Like, you can go down the list, Winston bubble, Matrix, Zarya bubble. Every hero like in the game has a cooldown to deal with Reaper ult. In mid-fight, when some of those cooldowns are used, Reaper ult is just oppressive, man. Like, how many times have you guys been like, oh, the fight's won, and the Reaper just goes, die, and you're like, I guess I die. And that's because it's these mid-fight, when an engagement is happening, not ahead of the team, but mid-fight, it is an oppressive ult.
Blossom in conjunction with Lucio's beat can also be a great counter to EMP if you're hidden, similar to Diva Bomb, as Nata explains here.
Enemy team EMPs, your Reaper hides, right? And your Reaper comes back in with a beat Reaper ult. Why? When you're jumping in with EMP, right? You're not caring as much about like carrying your life. Why? Because you think you're like, oh, we EMP'd, we can kill them, right? So you're not looking to DM somebody. You're not looking to bubble somebody. You're not looking to boop somebody. You're looking to int on someone. You're looking for what you look at one target, you tunnel vision on that target, and you kill that target, right? Like the beat happens, right? And then right with that beat, the Reaper ult happens, and they get the Moira. And that immediately peels for their team.
Unlike the Doomfist, Zarya Bubble will help you gain much more value out of your engagements due to how much disruption CC can cause, hence coordinate if possible. A very niche but important enough tip is that you may want to do aerial blossoms against aerial heroes such as Mercy, Echo or Farah, as in conjunction with the shotgun animation cancel, you may be able to kill them in around a second, if not less. Now onto the playstyle, positioning and composition section. With Reaper there are two main playstyles, flanking or frontlining. Here's Spilo doing a brief overview of these two concepts.
Do I play frontline? Can I just put out spam damage? I don't need to worry about it? Or should I be playing flanker to bait more attention towards me? With Reaper, the big thing is like the playstyle stuff. Like, you play Reaper where you can flank with short sightlines to put out a lot of pressure and obviously time it really well. It's very similar to Tracer. He's just a little less flexible with how he does it.
As quickly mentioned in that clip, if you are going to flank with or without TP, and this applies to all the three main types of compositions that I'll be going more in depth on, timing your flanks is vital. If too early, the enemy team will force you out, costing them nothing and making the fight a 5v6, but flank too late and the entire team fight will be a 5v6. Keep in mind that since Reaper's mobility is more clunky than a Tracer's, timing is even more important. There's also a third sub-play style, which is lurking, as Spilo yet again explains and evaluates here.
Lurking would be, my team is here, the enemy team is here. I was here as the enemy team walked from spawn, and they walked into my flank where I'm already there without even having a TP. And obviously this is higher risk but higher reward because there's no audio cue of TP. They don't even see you TPing, and you can be a little bit more selective about where you flank. You don't have to, oh, my TP can only reach here. You can be waiting there. The obvious risk is that if they scout you ahead of time as they're coming back.
Now onto splitting up the frontline and flanking playstyles with respect to the three main compositions, being Brawl, Poke and Dive. You want to be holding soft off angles from your core, as you'll end up drawing more attention away from the frontline and onto you. In terms of holding chokes in a Brawl mirror, you can also split from core, similar to how Nata explains it here.
You can also just have, your team play over here, right? And have your Mei stacked here, and maybe have your Lucio sort of chilling over here looking for a boop into your team, and then maybe have maybe your Diva off angle, right? Because your Diva's got jets, they push Diva just flies away, right? They're gonna have to deal with a Lucio, core coming in here, they're gonna have to deal with Diva there, right? Essentially, they're gonna have to get pressed by 3 different angles, and that's really, really, really annoying to deal with. Let's say you put your core over here, and you put your Mei over here. If your core backs off, your Mei is stranded. And that's why also when you do these split plays, you're sort of committing more on these chokes. You're looking to go harder. But if your Mei and core is together, and you want to kite, it's safer, because now you don't have to worry about it. The split where you sort of saw the core plus Diva, right? In this situation, if your core is pushed, your core backs up, your Diva just flies away. it's safe, right? So if you want to play slower and you sort of want to like live more, right, and you know that you might need to back up because the enemy team might ult or something, then maybe putting your D.Va on the side is better.
That nicely leads me on to the flanker and Brawl playstyle, where you can flank to retake chokes, especially if you don't have a Mei, as Nata again explains here.
Can we do something to split their focus is the first thing you should think about, or get some type of angles. I think, hey, do you have a Reaper? Can you sort of have a way where your core is pushing main, and then your Reaper sort of teleports behind here, and then surprises them from behind? Enemy team's playing here, right? The Reaper like pressures their backline. They all turn around for the Reaper. You push then in. Or the Reaper goes behind and like shoots the Mei, forces cryo, and then your team pushes forward. And the concept with like Reaper, right, is like you're gonna actually do damage to them, right? But let's say maybe the cart's over like here, and the enemy team's holding close. Well, then you can also go force point and force the enemy team to back up and force them to get out of his choke.
Onto the Frontline and Poke playstyle, Reaper and Poke is often oxymoronic. However, if playing double shield in what's typically considered to be a long sightline map, such as Havana, you can soft off angle to where the long sightlines don't matter, as shown in this example on Havana First Point. You may also want to force objective to aid your inherently brawlier playstyle, although be careful of long sightlines. With the flanker and Poke playstyle, which is typically your best call to action, you can do the traditional teleport behind flank, as Spilo explains here.
Looking at the situation, be like, okay, we have to break a choke. So for me standing on frontline while the Junkrat Torbjorn spams my Reinhardt, that's not going to work. I need to TP past, put some pressure on backline, get them to all turn around, force some cooldowns, and then Wraith back to my team.
However, stereotypically Poke compositions such as double shield can play alike to Brawl as implied prior, with Reaper splitting late as the core pushes in, as Mineral explains here.
Here is another example against a slower bunker composition. They tank the bullhook combo and matrix the follow-up, all while Birddrake teleports up to shove the Widowmaker out of a crossfire angle. Spitfire neutralize another hook, one of Charger's best weapons in a neutral fight, and eventually make their way onto the point. At this point, Guangzhou is essentially at the mercy of Happy hitting a clutch shot, since their comp simply doesn't stand a chance in a brawl against the Reaper.
Onto the Frontline and Dive playstyle. Again, soft off angles are important, but even more vital, as Fafa and Spilo explain here.
Nobody from Shock can stabilize here because of Reaper, and nobody from Shock can stabilize here because of Sombra. So you're absolutely right.
You know, they also have angles, so now they're pressuring here, forcing this D.Va to make an option of like, do I want to DM the Sombra? Do I want to DM the Reaper? Do I want to DM these guys?
The other thing that you can touch on as well, the reason why map control is good is not just because of like the vision manipulation that you're describing, but it's also because cover just doesn't exist. Like Winston can't stop taking damage here. He can't stop taking damage here. He can't stop taking damage here. There is nowhere to hide because of the angles that allow people to shoot continuously. There never is any corner.
Keep in mind that Ivy on the Reaper was also playing in Dojo because of the shorter sightlines. Finally, onto flanking in dive. Generally speaking, you want to avoid flanking in neutral fights in fast dive due to it taking too long. However, when kiting as 6 in dive, you may want to look for an opportunity to teleport behind the enemy team, as Nata explains here.
That's number one, I'll say they pushed in. Then white mode kited. Then white mode decided to push back in with their call, right, which is 2. Team CC then kited as their 2. But during this 2, okay, what Team CC did is what I like to call like split focus. So they decided to send a Winston behind, okay? And essentially what they're doing now is they're having the Winston go behind like the yellow team, which is white mode, and pressure them. So when white mode is pushing forward, that push becomes really hard, right? What has to happen is some people are going forward, but some people have to turn for this Winston. So now their push gets split, which then, in theory, this will then allow Team CC to push back in hard. And then it'll be very hard for white mode, because now they're split, for them to be able to kite later. You can sort of imagine this concept, by the way, with the Reaper. If white mode, when they pushed back in, Team CC, had a Reaper, and Team CC backed up all the way, Team CC, Reapers teleport behind here, and then started pressuring, like, their backline. That would, again, force white mode, when they're trying to, like, W key into Team CC, when they're kiting, to split. People would have to turn for that Reaper, right? And some people would still go forward. And that'll force, right, there to be a split focus.
When playing with or against slow dive, the more general flanking tips and heading for backlines still apply. Make sure you time your dives with your Winston. Now, I don't really finish off my DPS guides with hero-specific matchups, but since Reaper often has hard counters due to his range, I thought I'd round off with 3 key concepts to minimize how much flankers and ranged heroes counter you, specifically Tracer and Pharmacy. The first concept, specifically against Tracer, is to hold narrow and short sightlines. A Tracer is not going to want to duel you at a range of about 8 meters or less, and especially if she's forced to engage from the front. A second concept, specifically against Farah, but also interlinks with Tracer, is to position in as many enclosed areas as possible, possible. This is simply because Pharah does not have LOS onto you. These first two concepts can also be applied to King's Row first point attack, where you can take Hotel, which is enclosed and has short sightlines. Keep in mind that there are some areas of the map, such as this catwalk on the outskirts of Point, which are technically enclosed but don't have short enough sightlines. But what if you don't have an enclosed area of the map to play around, such as Basan Sanctuary? Well, this leads me onto the third concept, which is to split late and fast. For instance, as soon as your team contests a corner, you teleport anywhere behind the enemy team to help split focus. Well, that's it for the guide. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.
And I say, hey, living